I'm Joan Bryden, and I'm here at the lovely home of Michael Shirtz. And I'm excited to say that I haven't had this opportunity to talk with Michael for a while. We used to do a radio show for a number of years. And I just want to say it's so wonderful to see you again, Mike.
It's fantastic to see you.
How did the dream begin? Was there influence in your life that, it was all about music, and then you went into education and conducting and so on. But where did the dream even begin? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, I have. I grew up in a household where music was always important. You know, my mom sang, and music was always important to her, and she was also a teacher. My dad taught as well, not in schools. I always love to tell a story of my dad. He went through school to be a teacher. Then in his senior year, went into the high school to do his first day of student teaching. And after his first day of student teaching, went back to the college and went over and became a business major. So realized that teaching was not for him, but he did teach, and he did classes along the way for different things and seminars. And so the education part was really strong. But my grandfather was a professional musician, played with the big bands, and worked with a slew of artists and musicians, you know, that to us are legends. To him were just names of people that he worked with. And that I realized that, you know, the music that he did, I really loved. I felt a calling to the jazz and the big band world and swing world. And I was growing up in the 90s, of course, when there was kind of this emergence with swing. You know, swing music was starting to come back, especially with my age group. You know, high school kids were getting into swing dancing and stuff, and it was fun. It also was the 50th anniversary of World War II, so I think that had a lot, you know, pull in the 90s of bringing that music back. And so the timing was right. And so I started getting interested in learning, okay, how does this all work? And so, you know, I started, you know, learning how to play piano and started learning how to sing and understand how these songs went. And
so you didn't know how to do either of those? Or
well, not as a kid, no. It was just what you heard in the house. And especially when I go down in the summers, I would stay with my grandparents, and so that music was always there. Yeah. And he was still pretty active in writing, and he was an educator, an education administrator himself. After his music profession. So his career constantly evolved, and then he became an author and a writer and a historian. And so his career was always evolving, and he was always really busy. So I saw that. And I fell in love with the music. And so after watching a lot of different videos one day that my grandfather had out of Ella Fitzgerald live at Wolf Trap, that was Oscar Peterson was playing for. So I started really getting interested in this music. What was kind of defining for me is that in the 90s, growing up in Marquette, Dave Brubeck came to town. And so I didn't know anything about Brubeck or anything like that. And so was a part of that concert, and a lot of different, there was choirs and orchestras and stuff in the city that came, and they did a world premiere of a new piece that he had written. And so, not knowing much about him at all, left that concert knowing that this is what I'm going to do. This is exactly, between the influence of my grandfather, the experience of being in this concert, you know, with Dave Brubeck, and being exposed to pretty innovative jazz, not traditional jazz necessarily, I realized this is what I want to do. And so after that, started paying attention to my grandfather in a different way, in a way of learning and understanding the business and understanding the music. And from there went on and started to just, like I said, fiddle around at the piano, and eventually put my own group together. It was a small trio. And then started a quartet, so modeled after Dave Brubeck's quartet, and started working on learning how to compose and learning how to sing, and so I had a very supportive family because of that, and just kind of that interest kind of fueled itself and took off, and then was lucky enough to start getting booked and started, you know, doing gigs, and started working with other instrumentalists and musicians that had these long careers that I was the young kid on the bandstand with them. But my gosh, the learning that I got from them. I mean, there were some great musicians that I got to just sit in with, and they would, during the breaks, they would tell stories about the industry and what they did. You know,
that's what hooked you.
Well, that did hook me. Yeah. And but I was fascinated because I realized that, you know, my grandfather was not just was he a part of history, but with the big bands and the work that he was doing and the different groups that he played with. You know, Jimmy Dorsey and Tommy Dorsey and Horace Heidt and Johnny Long were the orchestras he was playing with. Then he had his own orchestra, the Tommy Weldon Orchestra. And so that was fascinating to me because he had his own big band. And I looked at the singers and the instrumentalists like Ella Fitzgerald and Jimmy Durante and Abbott and Costello. He was in the movie Hit the Ice with them and was a part of that. So I looked at that career, I'm like, gosh, that's amazing. But he was also on the forefront of history. You know, those acts and those performers and stuff were paving the way for younger musicians and younger artists that later came on the scene, and started to develop this whole century of creativity that, you know, we've defined as the American Songbook, that we've defined as the great legendary entertainers, and all these cats that were doing it, that became big legends. They were just loving music and loving performing and sharing that with other people.